Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Thursday, November 19th, 2020. Today I'm going to recap the NBA draft and then do a little NBA chatter after with some storylines to look forward to with free agency slated to begin tomorrow night. College football will go over last night's games and look ahead to tonight's game. We will preview tonight's game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. We'll recap last night's episode of The Masked Singer and my best bet of the day. All right, we'll start with the NBA draft. It was a very fun night, to say the least, and with a ton of crazy subplots going on left and right. And the first pick, to nobody's surprise, wound up being Anthony Edwards. And he goes into a good situation. You got D'Angelo Russell, you got Karl Anthony Towns, and you have yourself a little foundation there. So, good for Anthony Edwards. I gave this grade an A+, obviously, because the Timberwolves have the number one pick and they took the best player, so good job. Number 2 with the Golden State Warriors, they took James Wiseman, the big man out of Memphis. Obviously, Wiseman barely played in college, and he essentially opted out of the season. And then he was involved in that whole scandal thing. This is a good fit for the Warriors. And now, in the wake of this Klay Thompson injury, which we'll talk about in the next segment, maybe Golden State will not trade for that second star, or maybe they will with this Klay Thompson news and try to replace Klay Thompson, or they go and sign a free agent. That's also not out of the realm of possibility. So, yeah, Wiseman, great fit. He could play the center position. And you have Draymond at the 4, so that'd be a weird combo up front. And then you have Curry, and then 2 question marks, really, because Klay Thompson's going to be out for the season with the torn Achilles. And then, Andrew Wiggins is there. That's right, Andrew Wiggins is the small forward there. And then you have a question mark at shooting guard then. Or you put Andrew Wiggins at the 2, and then you go out and sign another wing. So they have a big hole on the wing right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Maybe they do put some assets together for Bradley Beal or something like that. Or maybe they could go cheap for now and get somebody that is on an expiring contract or something. I'll think of some veterans potentially that could get into that spot for Klay Thompson for a year. And then number 3, the Charlotte Hornets took LaMelo Ball, the point guard from the Illawarra Hawks in Australia, Team USA. I give this pick an A+ as well as the James Wiseman pick. So Ball comes in and will be the point guard, and then Devontae Graham's there's the 2 guard, and then Terry Rozier off the bench, and then you have Miles Bridges up front, and some other players that are still there. I don't think Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is still there. But yeah, they have a lot of veterans there in Charlotte. But yeah, LaMelo goes to an interesting situation. Now the Bulls are involved with Michael Jordan. So that's interesting. Number 4, the Chicago Bulls. Patrick Williams, the small forward from Florida State. This was the worst pick in the top 10, in my opinion. And there was another one that I didn't really like either, but this one was the worst. I give this a D. Patrick Williams is a good player, but it's just a bad fit. I'm sorry. And there were better players on the board. Denny Avdija, Obi Toppin. Come on, Bulls. So, yeah, Patrick Williams comes into a murky situation. He's supposed to be a stretch 4, but now it looks like he's going to start a small forward with Wendell Carter Jr. up front. And then they also have Zach LaVine at point guard and then Kobe White. So I guess Patrick Williams could conceivably play the 4. And then you have Wendell at the 5, and then the 2 guards in LaVine and Kobe White there. And Otto Porter Jr., I believe, is still on the Bulls too. So I guess there's a way you could play him at the 4. But they do have a surplus of big men in Chicago, and Lauri Markkanen. That's who I was blanking on. Lauri Markkanen's essentially the power forward there. So, But yeah, not the best fit in the world. I would have traded back and you could have still gotten Patrick Williams at 7 and Detroit could have moved up and they could take somebody who they wanted, but we'll get to them in a couple minutes. Number 5, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Isaac Okoro, the small forward out of Auburn. This pick was okay. I mean, I think they could have traded back for him a little bit. I give this pick a C. This team is literally the land of misfit toys. You have the 2 bigs in Kevin Love and Andre Drummond, and then you have the 2 guards in Darius Garland and Colin Sexton, and then you have Okoro there. So that's an interesting 5-some there in Cleveland. And this is a better fit than Patrick Williams with the Bulls. But I didn't really like this pick either for Cleveland. I think they could have taken Obi Toppin or Denny Avdija. But the problem here is if they took Denny Avdija here, then it'd be awesome. But no, they go with Isaac Okoro. Who's another young player. The Atlanta Hawks at number 6 go with Onyeka Okongwu, the big man from USC. I give this pick an A+. Talented big man falls to them. I mean, they could have taken Obi Toppin here. So I'm actually going to bump them from an A+ to an A, only because they could have had Denny Avdija or Obi Toppin. But this was still a good fit. I like the idea of Okongwu and John Collins together. And then you have Trae Young running the point, and then you have Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter as your wing. So I think that's a really good fit pick for the Hawks. I'm going to give that an A. So my grade so far, A+, 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 D, C, and then A. And then next up, the Detroit Pistons at number 7 went with Killian Hayes, the French point guard. I didn't really love this pick either. Tyrese Halliburton was sitting there for them, and they could have went with him. They could have went with Obi Toppin or Denny Avdija, but no, they go with Killian Hayes here. I'm going to give this pick a C+ because I know that they are going for the need pick there. I can understand why they took Killian Hayes, and they are intrigued by his upside. And then maybe they keep Derrick Rose around, and he could learn from Derrick Rose a little bit. And then Blake Griffin's still there in Detroit as well. They trade away Luke Kennard, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then Bruce Brown's also gone. So Detroit's really remaking their team. And they had a couple other first-round picks, which we'll get to throughout this segment. Number 8, the New York Knicks take Obi Toppin, the big man out of Dayton. I give this pick an A+. So Leon Rose, his first draft pick as a New York Knicks executive, very, very good. He can thank the 4 teams ahead of him for not taking Obi Toppin, quite frankly. But, hey, you got to take advantage of a situation when a great prospect/player falls in your lap. And to me, Obi Toppin's one of the surer things of this draft. I like the fit here at the Knicks. He's not a good defensive player, but a defensive coach and Tom Thibodeau should really help him as a player. And then he comes in with R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, and that's a nice little threesome if you're New York. Number 9, the Washington Wizards take Denny Avdija, the wing out of Israel. This is another A+ pick. They took advantage of a great prospect/player falling to them. Toppin and Avdija were ranked 4th and 5th on my board, respectively. Toppin 4th and Avdija 5th, only behind the top 3 guys. In that order, Edwards, Weissman, Ball. And so Avdija comes into an interesting situation. Bradley Beal, Thomas Bryant, Rui Hachimura. So they have themselves a nice little core. And John Wall. So that's a really good starting 5, assuming they keep that team together. Number 10, the Phoenix Suns go with Jalen Smith, the big man out of Maryland. This was another pick I didn't really like in the top 10 or in the lottery. I'm going to say this is a C, but I understand why they did this because they needed a big. I'm sure the Suns were hoping Obi Toppin would follow them, but nope, the Knicks took him right away to avoid that. So I understand the fit with Jalen Smith. So that's why I'm only giving them a C rather than a lower grade because I understand they reached, but at the same time it was a need pick as well. So you have Jalen Smith and DeAndre Ayton up front. And in the backcourt, you got Chris Paul and Devin Booker. And then you have Mikal Bridges as your three. So that's a really nice foundation for the Suns, who really look to be a contender in the West next year. Number 11, the San Antonio Spurs go with Devin Vassell, the wing out of Florida State. I give that pick an A. It was a really good pick by San Antonio. They need some help on the wing. DeMar DeRozan's not getting any younger. Maybe he wants out of the Spurs. But say they keep him, so you have DeJounte Murray, Vassell, DeRozan, Aldridge, and Jakob Poeltl as your possible starting five. And then you have the kid from Kentucky last year, Keldon Johnson, off the bench. And I don't know if Rudy Gay's still at the Spurs or not. So, solid pick for San Antonio, and I think Vassell's in a good situation learning from one of the best in the game in Greg Popovich. Number 12, the Sacramento Kings, Tyrese Halliburton, the point guard out of Iowa State. A-plus pick. They stole him. I thought Halliburton would go in the top 8. He did not. He fell all the way to Sacramento at 12. This is a great pick. It'd be him and the Aaron Fox in that backcourt, which would be very interesting. And you have Marvin Bagley up front, and Harrison Barnes, and Buddy Hield. So they got themselves a really nice core there, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Buddy Hield. And then the Bojan Bogdanovic thing fell through with the Bucks, so maybe he does go back to the Kings. So that's really interesting for the Kings. And now the question is, do they wind up re-signing Bojan Bogdanovic after they agree to trade him? Or do they trade him or sign him, trade him somewhere, and then they keep Buddy Hield around? So that's going to be very interesting. The Kings have a lot of backcourt / wing issues to take care of on their hands, because obviously with Halliburton in the mix now, that just brings more questions about Sacramento. But it's similar to New York. Like, Sacramento needed a forward more than a point guard, but that great player / prospect falls to them. You got to take it. It's like New York needed a point guard, so Halliburton would have made sense for New York. I would have probably given them an A+ or an A if they took Halliburton. But like, I understand why they took Obi Toppin, because a great player that's a top 5 player in this draft fell to them at number 8. Or they had 2 options with him and Denny Avdija. So this is similar to New York in the sense that they avoid the need pick and go with the best player available, which is normally the right thing to do if you're a rebuilding team like New York and like Sacramento. Although Sacramento is closer to playoff status than New York, obviously, and further along in the rebuild than New York. Number 13, the New Orleans Pelicans. Kira Lewis Jr., the point guard out of Alabama. So this pick makes all the sense in the world after the trading of Drew Holiday. I'd give this pick an A. He'll help them a lot, whether it's in a starting role or off the bench. Be him and Lonzo Ball. We'll talk about Lonzo Ball a little bit later on in the podcast. And then you got Zion and Jackson Hayes up front. And then Brandon Ingram at the 3. So that's a really nice fivesome there as well. Number 14, the Boston Celtics went with Aaron Naismith, the wing out of Vanderbilt. I'll give that pick a B+. I just thought that there are better options on the board like Sadiq Bey. But Naismith's a good player, and I think that here we go, good player off the bench for Boston the next couple years, because their team's already obviously loaded with good players. Number 15, the Orlando Magic, Cole Anthony, the point guard out of North Carolina. I give this pick an A-. So they went with a need pick, but it's also very risky. I thought Anthony should have went in like the later teens, but I understand why Orlando went with this selection. This could end up being a steal. And you got him and Markelle Fultz in the front court, and then Evan Fournier and the guy that got injured, but we won't see him until 2021, and then Nikola Vucevic. So I like the fit for Anthony. Maybe he'll start. Maybe he'll come off the bench. So I'm interested to see what happens there. Number 16, the Portland Trailblazers. Or no, I'm sorry. This is actually, it says Portland Trailblazers on the thing, but they traded this pick to Houston, and then Houston shipped this pick to Detroit. So this is Detroit's player, Isaiah Stewart, the big man out of Washington. I'm going to give this pick a B-. I think Stewart here is a reach. But I understand why Detroit did it, because it was a neat pick. Maybe they want to move on from Blake Griffin. Isaiah Stewart could be their center, and he could start for them. You got him and Killian Hayes, the Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin, and you just have a hole at small forward. But we'll get to the rest of their draft later. But after the pick on draft night, they still had a hole at small forward. Next up, the Minnesota Timberwolves from the Brooklyn Nets and Atlanta Hawks. Aleksej Pokusevski, the big man out of Serbia. I give this pick a B. They could use somebody with Karl Anthony Towns up front, so I understand this pick. Number 18, the Dallas Mavericks go with Josh Green, the shooting guard out of Australia. From Arizona. So this pick I would give a solid B+. Obviously, Dallas is a team that is looking to compete for a title this upcoming season. And Green, to me, is in a good situation where he could come off the bench and be a heat check guy for him. Number 19, the Brooklyn Nets from the Philadelphia 76ers and Los Angeles Clippers. Saddiq Bey, the small forward out of Villanova. This pick is actually going to the Pistons too, so damn. Detroit got themselves a player here at Bey. I think he could start. He reminds me a lot of former Villanova Wildcat Mikal Bridges. So then you would have Bey, you have Hayes, you have Stewart, and then you have the two veterans in Rose and Griffin. So that would be an interesting lineup for Detroit, because if I'm not mistaken, this Saddiq Bey is going to be playing for the Detroit Pistons, because Brooklyn traded this pick to Detroit. Clippers got Luke Kennard, and Brooklyn got Landry Shamet. We'll talk about that in a little while. Number 20, the Miami Heat go with Precious Achiuwa, the big man out of Memphis. A steal for Miami. Just is a very good Heat type of player. He could play up front with Bam at Adebayo, so that'd be pretty neat to see. So I would give this selection an A, and then the Bey pick I'd give an A+, if I didn't mention that already. 21st, the Philadelphia 76ers from Oklahoma City via Philly and Orlando. They go with Tyrese Maxey, the guard out of Kentucky. I don't think that Maxey is going to be with Philly. I don't know why I thought this pick is going to end up being moved in a trade. So, as things stand, it looks like he's in Philly. And I would give this pick a B-. Maxey, somebody I think could have gone higher. I just don't love the Philly fit, because they remade their team pretty much on the fly, which we'll get to in the next segment. But Maxey would be coming off the bench in this scenario, so they're banking on him to be Tyler Herro pretty much. So maybe I up this grade to a B. Next up, the Denver Nuggets from the Houston Rockets. At 22 goes Zeke Naji, the big man out of Arizona. Good pick. I'd give this pick a B+. Naji can potentially play with Nikola Jokic up front. He's a good energy guy. Reminds me a lot of Montrezl Harrell. Next up, the New York Knicks from the Utah Jazz. Leonardo Bellarmo. This pick was actually then dealt to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So Bellarmo is going to be a member of the Thunder. And for OKC's perspective, I give this pick a B-. It's only due to I have no idea which direction they're going. Because there's veterans on there, and then they traded a lot of veterans, too. Like, Danny Green was on the Thunder for a hot minute, and now he's in Philadelphia. Now Al Horford's in Oklahoma City. And then they're trading pieces left and right. If I'm not mistaken, Terrence Ferguson also went to the Sixers in that trade as well. So, for now, I'd give the Thunder a B- with that pick. The Milwaukee Bucks at 24th from the Pacers, and obviously this pick's going to New Orleans in the Drew Holiday deal. R.J. Hampton was the pick. He's out of Australia. Good upside play for the Pelicans, and maybe he becomes a real player for them. And he's someone whose stock really dropped after the season. 25, the New York Knicks. This was OKC's pick. Then he went to Denver, and then the Knicks traded back after trading up the Utah spot initially. They go with Emmanuel Quickly, the point guard out of Kentucky. Don't love this pick for New York. I would give this pick a C-. I think Peyton Pritchard would have been better for them. I think they made this pick solely due to the CAA ties with Leon Rose and John Calipari and Worldwide West, obviously, as well. So this was obviously the CAA pick of the night for the Knicks. Not that Quickly's a bad player. I just think that there are better options like Peyton Pritchard on the board for them and Tyrell Terry. Number 26, the Boston Celtics go with Peyton Pritchard, a point guard out of Oregon. Really good pick. I give that pick an A. I think Pritchard's going to be a really good player for the Celtics. Obviously, he'll probably start off the bench, and then eventually if they move off of Kemba Walker, then he can come in and potentially start. Number 27, the Utah Jazz from the Clippers via New York. Udoka Azubuike, the big man out of Kansas. I really don't like this pick for Utah. I'm going to give it a C. They're a better big man on the board for them to take. Azubuike was a good player in college, but he just kept getting hurt a lot. Number 28, the Los Angeles Lakers, which they trade their pick to OKC in the Dennis Schroeder deal. Jaden McDaniels, the small forward out of Washington. A good upside play for Oklahoma City. I'm going to give this pick a B. He could potentially start for them depending on how free agency and trades go for Oklahoma City. And we'll see if he develops into something. 29, the Toronto Raptors go with Malachi Flynn, the point guard out of San Diego State. It's a really good pick for Toronto. What if they lose Fred VanVleet, so they have another point guard in? Flynn, I think, is somebody who will come off the bench in this Raptors situation unless they lose Fred VanVleet. Then he could start with Kyle Lowry potentially, or they trade Kyle Lowry and blow the team up. So I'm going to give this pick an A for Toronto. And then 30, the Boston Celtics from the Milwaukee Bucks via the Suns. Desmond Bane, the shooting guard out of TCU. A more veteran type of player. I give this pick an A- for Boston. He could be a heat check guy off the bench for them. And on any other team, maybe he'd start. And then the rest of the picks, second round, Tyrell Terry goes 31st to Dallas. That was a good pick. Charlotte takes Vernon Carey Jr., the big man out of Duke, at 32. 33 was Minnesota. They go with Daniel Oturu, the big man from Minnesota. Philly goes with Theo Maledon, the point guard out of France. Not a huge Theo Maledon fan, but interesting. Sacramento at 35 went with Xavier Tillman, the big man out of Michigan State. Philadelphia. Actually, this pick was traded to Dallas. Tyler Bay, the forward out of Colorado. Great pick. Great pick. He'll help the Mavs. At 37, the Wizards went with Vit Krejci, the point guard from Spain. Don't really love that pick. The Knicks from Charlotte go with Saban Lee, the point guard out of Vanderbilt. I think that pick is being traded. or was traded. 39 was the Pelicans. They went with Elijah Hughes, the forward out of Syracuse. 40th, Memphis from Phoenix goes with Robert Woodard, the second from Mississippi State. He's the wing. The Spurs go with Trey Jones, the point guard out of Duke. Classic Spurs pick. 42nd, the Hornets go with Jamaican center Nick Richards. 43, Sacramento goes with Jamias Ramsey, the shooting guard out of Texas Tech. That's a possible steal right there. The Bulls from Memphis at 44 go with Marko Simovic, the Bulgarian center. Milwaukee at 45 went with Jordan Nwora, the forward from Louisville. Portland at 46 goes with C.J. Ellaby, the shooting guard from Washington State. 47, Boston goes with the point guard Yam Madar from Israel. Golden State went with Nico Mannion, the point guard out of Arizona, with the 48th pick. That's a steal. I think he could play for them next year. I really, really do. And then Philadelphia went with Isaiah Joe, the shooting guard out of Arkansas, at 49. 50, Atlanta goes with Skylar Mays, the point guard out of LSU. Golden State at 51 went with Justinian Jessup, the shooting guard out of Boise State. Sacramento at 52 goes with Kenyon Martin Jr., the shooting guard from the IMG Academy. That's obviously the son of Kenyon Martin, the former big man. 53, Oklahoma City went with Cassius Winston, the point guard out of Michigan State. 54, the Pacers went with Cassius Stanley, the shooting guard out of Duke. So I like that pick for Nana for a second round pick for a team that didn't have a first. Brooklyn at 55 went with Jay Scrubb, the shooting guard from John A. Logan College. That's an odd pick. Charlotte at 56 went with Grant Rillard, the shooting guard from Charleston. The Clippers at 57 went with Reggie Perry, the power forward out of Mississippi State. Philadelphia at 58 went with Paul Reed, the power forward out of DePaul. 59, the Toronto Raptors went with Jalen Harris, the shooting guard out of Nevada. And 60, the Pelicans went with Sam Morril, the shooting guard out of Utah State. And then the undrafted free agents, Miles Powell signed with the Knicks. I saw that. There were a couple other ones that I noticed that went undrafted and signed that probably should have been drafted. So yeah, that was the draft recap. And now I want to discuss a little bit of the offseason. Go team by team. Atlanta, obviously free agency begins tomorrow. The Hawks, we talked about them. They picked Onyeka Okongwu with their first rounder. They have the two forwards from last year, Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter, and then Trae Young and John Collins. I think that they're in play to make a veteran signing like a Serge Ibaka or something like that. So keep an eye out for the Hawks to make a surprising signing that could be a veteran that could help them. Then you have the Boston Celtics who might trade Gordon Hayward, and there are rumors about him going to Atlanta, which would be interesting. Do they move off of Cam Reddish, and Cam Reddish would go to Boston or something like that? Or DeAndre Hunter in Boston would be interesting too. So Hawks Gordon Hayward rumor I heard was interesting. Celtics obviously need a big man. Maybe that's where Serge Ibaka ends up. So that's really interesting. Brooklyn, that's another possible Serge Ibaka destination, I think. Obviously, you hear all the rumors that they might go out and try to trade for James Harden. We talked about that big trade with the Clippers yesterday with Landry Shamet and Luke Kennard. So that's really interesting. And I think that Shamet could potentially be an asset for Brooklyn to go out and get Harden. So it could be Shamet, Bruce Brown, Dinwiddie, Allen, LeVert, and maybe 3 first-round picks, I think, can get it done for James Harden. And then Brooklyn has Harden, Durant, Irving. Maybe they sign Serge Ibaka. And then you have DeAndre Jordan. So it's pretty much the OKC reunion and Kyrie and DeAndre. So that's really interesting. And I'm fascinated to see what Brooklyn does. And then you have Charlotte, who took LaMelo Ball. I think Terry Rozier could be in play for a trade. Miles Bridges' name was thrown out there too. That's weird. And then you heard a rumor that the most interesting, an interesting rumor regarding Charlotte was that that's the most likely destination for Russell Westbrook. Oh, and we have some breaking news on the podcast while doing some NBA talk. Atlanta is trading Dwayne Dedmon to Detroit. Sources tell The Athletic, and that's coming from Shams. So that is a very interesting move. So maybe I might get that call with Serge Ibaka correct. So they trade their starting center. Oh, and then it makes sense because last night they drafted Onyeka Okongwu too, so that makes a lot of sense. And then Detroit gets a big man, replaces Christian Wood. We'll get to Detroit in a little bit, but that's a very interesting trade that I just wanted to break on the podcast. And then the Bulls, I did not like their first-round pick of Patrick Williams. But there are ways that they could use him, and I laid out those scenarios. Maybe they trade Laurie Markkanen, maybe they deal one of their younger players. There was talks about them moving up and giving Golden State Wendell Carter Jr. in the 4th pick to move up to 2. You hear that rumor? That's because I think they want to draft LaMelo Ball. So that's really interesting. Cleveland, I didn't really like what they did either. That's just the land of misfit toys. Maybe they deal one of the big men or one of the point guards. Dallas, I think, is one of the teams I think can win a championship in 2021. Obviously, they pull off that trade with Philly. They send Seth Curry to Philly. They get back in return Josh Richardson and a couple picks. So now they have Luka, Josh Richardson, Kristaps Porzingis. And then they draft Tyrell Terry. Maybe he'll go in and have an impact for them right away. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a club option, so maybe he'll be a free agent. So if maybe they keep him. And then obviously they need a big man too. So maybe they're in play for Serge Ibaka too, for what it's worth. Marc Gasol there would be really good. I think that's a really good call. Marc Gasol in Dallas. And then Detroit we talked about with the trade for the big man, Dwayne Dedmon. So you got Dedmon there, you got Killian Hayes, you got Isaiah Stewart, Jaden McDaniels, I think's there, or not Jaden McDaniels, or Sadiq Bey. I'm sorry, it was Sadiq Bey, Derrick Rose, and Blake Griffin. And now, do they trade Rose or Griffin? I think that's certainly in play. They traded Luke Kennard to the Clippers and Bruce Brown to the Nets. So that team's really having a makeover on the fly. The Denver Nuggets, they, I think, are in play for some things. They have a lot of assets now. That's where R.J. Hampton is, by the way. He's with the Nuggets. That's the team he's going to end up on. And that's, yet again, Denver taking a chance on a guy that falls to them. Saw it with Michael Porter Jr., you saw it with Bol Bol, and now you see it here with R.J. Hampton. Those are 3 enticing assets that they could use in a trade to go out and get somebody like a Bradley Beal. Maybe. We'll see. And then imagine a lineup of Jamal Murray, Bradley Beal, Will Barton, and then obviously Jokic, and then they would need a power forward. But didn't they take Zeke Naji? Or no, Zeke Naji, I think, is going to be with the Thunder. Or with the Sixers. I don't remember. But Zeke Naji's going somewhere. I don't remember where. But yeah, R.J. Hampton's with Denver. I just thought about that. And then Golden State gets the devastating news yesterday that Klay Thompson tore his Achilles and is out for the 2nd consecutive season. Such a huge blow for the Warriors. Now they have a Pandora's box. Do they go rebuild and trade Draymond Green and build around Steph Curry? Or do they trade away some assets and Andrew Wiggins and future picks and go out to get that 2nd star with Stephen Curry and Draymond Green and James Wiseman? Or they include Wiseman in the deal, you never know. So Golden State, I think, with the Klay injuries under pressure to do something and do something ASAP, because I don't think the Warriors want another down season. The Houston Rockets, I think, are a team that might be heading for a down season, though the Harden rumors kind of died off over the last 24 to 48 hours. I do think that he still wants to go to Brooklyn to be with his buddies. I proposed a package for Harden with Landry Shamet, Bruce Brown, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, and Spencer Dinwiddie, and 3 first-round picks. I think that can get it done for James Harden. And Houston pretty much remakes their team on the fly with that trade. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Rockets do. Obviously, they traded Robert Covington to Portland. And then, obviously, Russell Westbrook's out there via trade as well. And maybe they trade him to Charlotte and they get back Terry Rozier. Maybe they get LaMelo back. That'd be kind of funny if LaMelo ends up getting traded for Westbrook. That would be hysterical. Or they keep them together and they trade Graham and Rozier. Or they trade one of those guys and Miles Bridges with a couple picks. So Houston has some intriguing options here for the offseason. Or do they keep that core together and then they go sign somebody with the mid-level exception that they got in that Trevor Ariza trade that sent that 16th pick and Ariza to Detroit. And that's another veteran on the Pistons that I could see them potentially moving off. Indiana, they have not really been heard from. They made a good draft pick yesterday in the 2nd round of Cassius Stanley from Duke. But there's a lot of rumors that they may trade Victor Oladipo. And maybe they want to break up that backcourt or the front court of Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis, and I think it's more likely that they trade Turner than Sabonis. They really like Sabonis, and then you have Malcolm Brogdon there too. So I think they're in for an interesting off-season as well. And then you got the Lakers, who pulled off the Dennis Schroeder deal. So their team's better now, even after winning the championship. I think they're losing Rajon Rondo. Do they bring back Dwight Howard? And obviously the big question is, does Anthony Davis take the full max or a 2-year max? Because I think it's inevitable that they're going to re-sign him. The Clippers, they pull off that weird Landry Shamet deal and end up with Luke Kennard. I didn't really love it. I'd rather have Landry Shamet than Luke Kennard. And then you got Luke Kennard, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, and now they really don't have a point guard unless, I guess, Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, but they might trade Lou Williams. Everyone seems to think that they'll trade Lou Williams, and maybe they'll trade Patrick Beverley too, or maybe they trade Kennard and get a point guard back, and maybe the Stars end up sticking around because there's a lot of Paul George trade rumors too. The Miami Heat, they make the good pick with Precious Achiara. Do they keep Goran Dragic around? I'm interested to see what they do. Do they upgrade at point guard potentially? Do they go out and get Fred VanVleet or something? You play him and Jimmy Butler and Harrow and Precious and Bam. I think they're in for an interesting offseason. Memphis. That was the team I predicted would make the surprise trade for Rudy Gobert about a month ago. But I don't know what they're going to do. They obviously have John Morant, who's awesome. And they got Jonas Valanciunas and Jaren Jackson Jr. But yeah, I think they're a team full of options. And I think they're under pressure to make a move to potentially make the postseason too. And then you have Minnesota, who pick Anthony Edwards first overall. There's a lot of rumors that they might trade the pick, but ultimately they kept it and took Anthony Edwards, which was the right call. And you have the Milwaukee Bucks, who pulled off the Drew Holiday trade the other day, but the Bojan Bogdanovic thing fell through. Now the question is, do they try for Bojan again, or they do something else? You have New Orleans, who has a platoon of assets now to build around Zion Williamson with, and then you obviously have Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. The New York Knicks had a good night last night. They take Obi Toppin. I talked about them having a nice little core of Toppin, R.J. Barrett, and Mitchell Robinson, and now they create $40 million of cap space after denying some player options. So maybe they go out and sign a big-name player. Maybe they go steal Fred VanVleet from the Raptors and they fill their hole at point guard that way. And then they use Miles Powell off the bench. So maybe they do sign Fred VanVleet. And then their starting five is VanVleet, R.J. Barrett. Maybe they sign a small forward in free agency too. Or acquire somebody via trade, a player that nobody wants, like Gordon Hayward. Maybe they sign Danilo Gallinari, or something like that. And then you have Toppin and Mitchell Robinson. So I think the Knicks could be very interesting next year with a couple free agent moves. And obviously Toppin, stealing him in the draft was very big for that franchise. Oklahoma City is in the midst of a rebuild. I think they're going to lose Danilo Gallinari. They traded a couple players away. They traded Ricky Rubio to the Timberwolves along with those two picks. And Oklahoma City traded up for that one pick. I'm going to pull it up where it was. So let me go back to the draft page on Wikipedia. And because that's something we failed to talk about while discussing the Timberwolves. Now that creates an interesting situation because Rubio is back with the Timberwolves. Does he come off the bench now? Because they have Edwards there. Maybe they play Edwards at the 3 and then D'Angelo at the 2 and Ricky Rubio at the 1 and then Cat. And then they have a whole power forward. So they'll probably squeeze somebody in there power forward. And they have Malik Beasley off the bench. So the Alexis Pokusevich is actually going to be with the Thunder. And then the Timberwolves will have Zeke Naji and Leonardo Bellarmo, I think, is with Minnesota. And or is it Tyrese Maxey? That'll be there. Or Jaden McDaniels is going to be with Minnesota. So maybe Jaden McDaniels plays the 4 for Minnesota. But yeah, the Jaden McDaniels pick and the Leonardo Bellarmo pick are with Minnesota with Rubio. And then 17, Alexis Pokusevich is with the Thunder. So I had to figure that one out there for a second. And then now their team, they have Horford there now with Steven Adams. So they have a big man strength now. They're going to lose Danilo Gallinari. Chris Paul's gone. They had Rubio for a hot second. He's gone. So Now the question is, what did they do with the backcourt? Oh, they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, too. He's also really good. Forgot about that guy. Maybe he plays point guard now. And he's the guy they got in the Paul George deal. I forgot about that guy. Never mind about them not having a point guard. That's a whoops, in my opinion. Or that's a whoops as a fact. Because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander made a huge jump last year. And he could potentially make another jump again this year, too, for Oklahoma City. Orlando, we talked about them a little bit. They took Cole Anthony. They have him. They have a lot of other assets, too. Maybe they make a move. And Jonathan Isaac's the guy that hurt his Achilles in the bubble that's going to miss next year. So that's a loss for Orlando. Philly remade their team on the fly pretty much. Now their projected starting five is Ben Simmons, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. And they trade Josh Richardson. They trade Al Horford. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do now. And then, so they made a very interesting move. And then Seth Curry's there. So Seth Curry is probably their sixth man. Unless they play Ben Simmons at the 3. And then Seth Curry's their point guard. And then they use Danny Green as their 2. So Philly really did a nice job remaking their team on the fly. Good job by Daryl Morey. The Phoenix Suns obviously have Chris Paul now. And Devin Booker. And then DeAndre Ayton, Jaden Smith, and Mikal Bridges. So that's going to be their starting five. I talked about them a little bit more in the draft segment. And then you have the Blazers, who made the move for Robert Covington. And then obviously the backcourt of Dame and McCollum, and then you have Jurkic, and then Carmelo, Gary Trent. Which one comes off the bench is the question. And if Trent's in the starting lineup, I guess they make Rocco the power forward. San Antonio took Devin Vassell, and now they have a ton of guards, and a ton of big men, and not much like combo forwards. And Keldon Johnson's there too, and they like him. Sacramento, we talked about them. They took Tyrese Halliburton. They just flat out stole him, and now they have a little bit of a backcourt forward problem, which I discussed at the top of the show. The Toronto Raptors, they took the point guard Malachi Flynn. Do they lose Fred VanVleet or keep him? It's going to be interesting. If they lose VanVleet and Gasol and Ibaka, do they trade Lowry and just rebuild around Pascal Siakam? So they're under some pressure in my mind. Toronto, Utah, do they keep that group together? Mike Conley's been talked about in trade rumors. They wound up drafting Yuzika Azubuike with that pick they got from New York. So do they use him as the power forward or somebody off the bench? And then they obviously have Joe Ingles there. And then the other Bogdanovich is in Utah too. So they have some interesting moves that they could pull off, the Jazz. And then last but not least, the Wizards. Do they trade Bradley Beal? Do they dump John Wall? There's rumors about a John Wall for Russell Westbrook swap. If that was the case, then I think that the Wizards have to throw in some first-round picks with that John Wall contract. Because that John Wall contract's awful. And so is the Russell Westbrook contract, but the John Wall one is much worse. Because at least Russell Westbrook has been healthy a lot more than John Wall and produces a triple-double on the night a majority of the time. So I would think Washington would have to throw in more than just John Wall to get Russell Westbrook. So there you have it. All the NBA talk. Free agency begins tomorrow evening. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. We might have to do a Saturday podcast to do some of the free agency stuff. So keep your eye out for that. And we'll talk more NBA tomorrow if anything happens. And then obviously Saturday if necessary, which I think is very realistic. Now I'm going to talk about sports that actually did happen last night, and I'm going to start with college football. 3 games last night, all in the MAC. Ball State defeats Northern Illinois 31-25. Ball State 2-1. Northern Illinois 0-3. Toledo over Eastern Michigan 45-28. So Toledo bounces back after that bad loss last week. Toledo's 2-1. Eastern Michigan 0-3. Western Michigan over Central Michigan 52-44. Western is 3-0 and Central drops to 2-1. One game tonight. Tulane against Tulsa. Tulsa's favored by 5.5. Total 54.5. I project Tulsa to be favored in this game by 2 and a total 57.5. I'm going to take Tulane getting the 5.5. I think this game is competitive. Tulane isn't that bad. Tulsa's been pretty good lately. They pulled off that big upset against SMU. But I think that they're due for a little bit of a letdown here. So give me Tulane plus 5.5. But I do think Tulsa will win the ball game. Now I'm going to preview and predict tonight's Thursday night game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. It's going to be a good one. Our rematch from a couple weeks ago. This was a Sunday night game. So it's weird that the same matchup is prime time twice in the same season. But this was the case this year because the Bucs-Raiders game was supposed to be the Sunday night game that week. But they moved that game back due to COVID because the Raiders had some COVID issues. But it looked like a good decision because this Seahawks-Cardinals game was a classic and Arizona won it in overtime and it was so fun. And that Bucs-Raiders game turned out to be a complete dud and Brady and company looked like the team they are right now in that game. And then this time around I project Arizona actually as a road favorite by 1.5. Total 57.5. Seattle doesn't have any fans, so that's why Arizona's projected as a favorite here. Seattle is -3, total 56.5. I'm taking Arizona in the 3 before this goes back to 2.5. I love it. I think Arizona has a shot to win the game. So give me Arizona +3 against Seattle. Worst case scenario, I push, but I'm going to say that that Zona ends up worst case scenario pushing. I still think Seattle will probably win the game, but I really do think that +3 is a safe bet for tonight. Now I'm going to recap last night's episode of The Masked Singer, which was indeed a good one. It was a double elimination, Group B. Cheryl Hines of I Can See Your Voice was the guest judge. The Seahorse went first. There's a guitar hint. Nashville, there are 2 babies. There's Pickles. Christmas. There's a tissue box. And then there's a church. And she performed Baby One More Time by Britney Spears. The special clue of the week was the mask from the past. So, the mask that came out for the clue, the special clue, was Hunter Hayes as the astronaut. And the special clue was always been solo. So this was somebody that's always been solo throughout her career. I'm sticking with my gut with Carrie Underwood, who obviously Nashville. That's a huge hint there because she's a country singer, and not only that, her husband Mike Fisher played for the Nashville Predators. Aha! And then she's a good guitarist. Obviously, Hunter Hayes is also a country singer, so that's where the tie would be. Jenny McCarthy went with Kesha. I don't like that pick. Kelly Pickler's a good pick because she's a country girl, and Pickles Pickler. So I like that call from Cheryl Hines. And then Ken Jug went with Sia. That was a terrible pick. Crocodile. There was an applause. There was a radio station 6 continents. So I guess this contestant traveled to 6 of the 7 continents. So they must have been on tour. Been around a long time. There's a record, a globe, Step by Step, which is a song by New Kids on the Block. A lucky lizard sign. There's a deck of cards, which was interesting. And this performance was to Bleeding Love by Leona Lewis. The Mask from the Past was the B, which was Gladys Knight. And then the clue was a cult classic movie. So, I don't know if that's a throw-off, or was he an actor in a cult classic movie, or does he like cult classic movies? And I don't know where the tie with Gladys Knight would be. I'm going to go with Donnie Wahlberg. The Step by Step was a huge deal, and then there were something about 5 in the previous clue package, and there's 5 people in New Kids on the Block. I almost said Boys to Men, oops. And then 6 continents, so I'm sure New Kids on the Block did tours in all of the 6 continents with the exclusion of Antarctica, obviously. Ken Jeong went with Jared Leto, Nicole Scherzinger went with Jordan Knight, and then Robin Thicke went with Justin Guarini, the former American Idol host, before Ryan Seacrest went solo. Then whatchamacallit went. There was a prom, there was coffee, there was a whistle, a toy statue, and then a king. The song was Lean Black by Terror Squad. The Mask from the Past was Ice Cream, which was Ninja. So that was a head scratcher to me. And then the hint was Already Won a Championship. My guess was Karl Anthony Towns, because there's those obvious hints towards basketball, and there's a hint about going through something in his life. Ken Jeong went with Lonzo Ball, Nicole Scherzinger went with Carmelo Anthony, and Cheryl Hines went with J.B. Smoove. Then last up was the Serpent. It was his college roommate as the person that was the friend in the clue package of the week. Good Mayo, Peanut Butter, Ambulance, Red Solo Cups, Snowflowers, and he performed Cool by the Jonas Brothers. The Mask from the Past was The Eagle, which was Dr. Drew. And then the hint was that he sang with one of the panelists before. My guess was Usher, because of the vocals were very strong and the high-pitched voice. Ken Jeong went with Jamie Foxx. Cheryl Hines and Robin Thicke both went with Donald Faisal. Nicole Scherzinger went with Dr. Elvis, which makes a lot of sense because he sang with her on the Quarantine show. So the 2 people that went home were whatchamacallit and Serpent. And I thought it should have been whatchamacallit and Crocodile, but Crocodile moved on. Whatchamacallit, my first impression guess was Draymond Green. My final guess was Karl Anthony Towns. Ken Jeong's first impression guess was Damian Lillard. His final guess was Lonzo Ball. Robin Thicke's first impression guess was Tyler, the Creator. His final guess was Michael Strahan, which I thought was terrible coming from Robin Thicke, who's normally good at this game. Jenny McCarthy's first impression guess was Winston Duke. Final guess, Devin Booker. Not bad. Nicole Scherzinger's first impression guess was stupid. Uncle It. Who's that? Her final guess I don't think was bad. Carmelo Anthony. Cheryl Hines' final guess was J.B. Smoove. And who was it? Lonzo Ball. Ken Jeong was right. And very fitting that Lonzo Ball's unmasking comes on the night that LaMelo Ball, his brother, was drafted 3rd overall by the Charlotte Hornets. And it makes a lot of sense, too, because Group B's first episode, Lonzo, a.k.a. the whatchamacallit, sang I Wish by CeeLo. And it's like, hello, I wish I could be a baller. That's one of the words. I wish I could be a baller. Get it? Baller. He's a ball. So, makes all the sense in the world for this to be Lonzo Ball. Obviously, his family has the reality show. And then there's a hint that he was going through something. Obviously, he lost his grandmother a couple years ago. He is in a complicated relationship, and he's a father. Obviously, he's on again, off again relationships with the baby mom, Denise Garcia, who's obviously a part of that reality show with the Ball family. And then it looked like that they straightened things out a little bit. So that's good because Lonzo just had his birthday not long ago, and she threw him a surprise party. So that was pretty cool. So it does look like things are well with Lonzo and his baby mama right now. So that's good. So I think it's really cool that Lonzo was on this show, and hopefully his daughter understood it and got a kick out of it. And I'm sure his girlfriend Denise got a kick out of it as well. And then there's a king hint, obviously. LeBron played with Lonzo Ball, so the king was referenced to LeBron James. So that's really cool to see that Lonzo was the whatchamacallit. And it makes sense, too. And it was really, 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 really cool to see him on this show. And then the Serpent. My first impression guess was Usher. My final guess was Usher. Ken Jeong's first impression guess was Usher. His final guess was Daveed Diggs. Nicole's first impression guess was Oak. Final guess, Dr. Elvis. Jenny McCarthy's first impression guess was John Legend. Final guess, Taye Diggs. Robin Thicke's first impression guess, Wayne Morris. Final guess, Donald Fazel. And then Cheryl Hines went with Donald Fazel as her final guess. And who was it? Dr. Elvis. Nicole Scherzinger correct for the second week in a row. And then Ken Jeong was right tonight, too, with Lonzo. And then Nicole, obviously, last night with Dr. Elvis. Obviously, Dr. Elvis sang with Nicole on the quarantine show that the Masked Singer had, the After the Mask, when everybody was virtual and doing the shows from home. And it was cool to see Dr. Elvis on the show, so very fitting. And I thought Dr. Elvis did a good job. He should still be on the show. I think Crocodile should have went home, but good for Crocodile. Crocodile's good, but Serpent was better, and Serpent unfortunately got the boot. And next week is Group C, so you'll be seeing mushroom, broccoli, and jellyfish next week. And then one of those contestants go home, and then you'll see a group performance, and you'll see a SmackDown too. So I'm looking forward to next week's episode. That's going to be a lot of fun. And by the way, next week's episode is actually going to be on Thanksgiving. So we're going to probably do a show Wednesday. We're not going to do a show on Thanksgiving. We'll probably just do preview Masked Singer Wednesday on the show next week. And we won't do a Thanksgiving show because it's a holiday. And then on Black Friday in the morning, I'm probably going to recap everything that happened in college basketball and college football. And then, obviously, the 3 Thanksgiving NFL games and the NBA stuff and everything. So, Black Friday podcast is going to be super duper busy. And last but not least, my best bet of the day, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm going to go with Tulane. I feel better about Tulane getting the points rather than Arizona, only because Tulane's getting 5.5, and I think that's a shootout. So, and plus a competitive game. So give me Tulane plus 5.5 against Tulsa for best bet. And that's it for the show today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping college football and any other NBA offseason stuff that gets leaked out or any signings that happen. Free agency starts tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. And I'm obviously going to be recording the podcast before then and probably in the morning. So maybe stuff gets leaked out by tonight and whatnot. And then obviously Thursday Night Football. And I'll do my picks for Fab 5 in each the NFL and college football. And then we'll go over the Korean series as well. And my best bet for tomorrow as well. Hope you guys have a great day, everybody.